This is furious HOA Karens. It started with snow and ended with a board meltdown. Sandra Morgan was standing on my driveway at 6:15 in the morning, screaming that I failed to salt and she was calling it a safety emergency and issuing the maximum fine. "This is not cleared and I am not leaving until it is," she yelled, waving a clipboard with one hand and pointing at the temporary handrail I had braced against my front steps with the other. The handrail was a simple 2x4 bolted to the concrete, something I put up 3 days earlier after the first hard freeze turned my steps into a skating rink. Sandra called it an unapproved structure. I called it common sense. We were not going to agree. I work as a city permit tech in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, so I know exactly what requires a permit and what does not. A temporary brace for icy stairs does not need one. Sandra did not care. She was the vice president of the Canyon View Ice Run Terrace Association, and she had decided this was the moment to make an example of me. Behind her, a tow truck idled in the street, exhaust puffing white in the freezing air. The driver stood beside the cab, holding a clipboard of his own, waiting for her signal. I stepped outside in my brown parka with the hood up and an ice scraper in one hand. My breath came out in clouds. "You cannot tow my car for a handrail," I said. She snapped on a pair of rubber gloves like she was about to perform surgery. "This is not snow, it is non-compliance," she said. "You missed the deadline for winter modifications. You are in violation of Section 12, subsection 4.3. I need proof of compliance now, or the vehicle goes." I had no idea what deadline she was talking about. The HOA portal had been down for a week, and I never got an email. But Sandra was already moving, waving the tow driver forward. He looked uncomfortable, glancing between us. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Sandra froze. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "Documenting," I said. "You are threatening to tow my car over a safety handrail during an ice emergency. I want this on record." Her face went red. "You do not get to record me without permission," I laughed. "This is my driveway, Sandra. I can record whatever I want." She turned to the tow driver. "Hook it up." He hesitated. "Ma'am, if there is a dispute, I usually wait for law enforcement." Sandra pointed at him. "I am authorizing this on behalf of the association. You have immunity under the tow contract. Do your job." I stepped between the truck and my car. "I am not moving, and you are not hooking anything until I see the actual violation notice in writing." Sandra pulled a folded paper from her pocket and slapped it into my hand. "There, signed yesterday, effective immediately." I unfolded it. The notice claimed I installed an unpermitted structure, failed to submit a modification request, and violated snow safety protocol by creating an obstruction. It threatened a $500 fine and immediate towing if I did not remove the handrail by midnight. "Midnight last night," I said. Sandra nodded. "You are 12 hours late." I looked at the date on the notice. It was signed at 4 in the afternoon the day before, which meant I had 8 hours to comply. But I never received it. How was I supposed to know about this? She smiled. "The notice was posted on the portal. I already told you the portal has been down all week. That is your problem, not mine," she said. "Ignorance is not an excuse." The tow driver stepped forward, tow strap in hand. I raised my phone higher. "I am calling the police," I said. Sandra laughed. "Go ahead, they will tell you this is a civil matter. The association has the right to enforce covenants." I dialed anyway. While I waited for dispatch, Sandra planted a small snow gauge stake in the snowbank beside my driveway. "What is that for?" I asked. "Compliance monitoring," she said. "If your snow depth exceeds 6 inches at any time, it is an automatic fine. We will be checking daily." Dispatch answered. I explained the situation. The operator sounded tired. "Sir, if this is an HOA matter, you need to take it up with your board or an attorney. We cannot intervene in covenant enforcement." I felt my chest tighten. "They are trying to tow my car over a handrail." She sighed. Is the vehicle on your property? Yes. Then we cannot stop the tow unless you can prove it is stolen or fraudulent. Do you have proof the tow is illegal? I looked at Sandra, who was smirking. Not yet, I said, and hung up. The driver looped the strap under my bumper. My small business reputation was at risk because the HOA had already started spreading lies about me in the neighborhood group chat, claiming I was a safety hazard and a code violator. If they towed my car and posted about it, I would lose clients. I pulled the folder I had been holding and opened it. Inside was a clean timeline packet with dates, receipts, weather screenshots, and photos. I had been keeping records since the day I moved in, because I knew Sandra had it out for me. I handed the driver a printed copy of my permit exemption letter from the city. This structure does not require a permit, I said. It is a temporary safety device under state code. The driver read it, then looked at Sandra. She grabbed the paper from his hand. This is fake. I pulled out my work ID. I am a permit tech for the city, Sandra. I wrote that exemption myself. It is signed by the building official. Her face twisted. You cannot just exempt yourself. That is a conflict of interest. I shook my head. I did not exempt myself. The building official did. Because this is not a structure, it is a safety brace. If you had asked me instead of ambushing me at dawn, I would have explained that. Sandra turned to the driver. I do not care what his fake letter says. The association rules override city code. Hook it up. The driver looked at the letter again, then at me. I stepped closer and lowered my voice. If you tow this car based on a fraudulent violation, you are personally liable. I will file a complaint with the state towing board, and I will sue you and your company. He looked at Sandra. Ma'am, I think we should wait for confirmation. She screamed. You work for me. Do your job or I will find someone who will. The driver unhooked the strap and walked back to his truck. I am not risking my license over this, he said, and climbed into the cab. Sandra shouted after him, but he pulled away, tires crunching through slush. She turned on me, shaking. You think you won? This is not over. I can put you on the agenda and keep you there. She stormed off, leaving the snow gauge stake behind. I pulled it out of the snowbank and took it inside. My hands were shaking. I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. The HOA portal was still down, but I had screenshots of the outage message. I also had the exemption letter, photos of the handrail, and now video of Sandra threatening me. I started a new folder and labeled it evidence. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a group text from the Canyon View Ice Run Terrace Association board. Subject line: Compliance escalation. The message claimed I had refused a lawful tow, threatened a vendor, and obstructed HOA enforcement. It listed 3 new violations: failure to remove snow within 12 hours of accumulation, unapproved modifications still in place, and harassment of board members. Each violation carried a $250 fine. Total, $750, due in 5 days. I texted my friend Lucas, a property manager who knew HOA procedure inside and out. He called me back immediately. They are trying to bury you, he said. This is retaliation. You need to file a dispute and request a hearing. Do it in writing, certified mail, and copy the management company. I asked him what management company. He paused. You do not have one? I thought all HOAs out there had third-party management. I checked my welcome packet. There was no management company listed. The board ran everything themselves. That is bad, Lucas said. That means Sandra controls the process. She can schedule the hearing, set the agenda, and rule on disputes. You need to force transparency. Request all meeting minutes, violation policies, and vendor contracts. If she refuses, file a records request under state law. Make her show her work. I wrote it all down. He added one more thing. Do not pay the fines. If you pay, you are admitting guilt. Dispute everything. I drafted a dispute letter that afternoon. I cited the exemption letter, the portal outage, and the lack of proper notice. I requested a hearing, a copy of the winter enforcement policy, and proof that the board had authority to issue retroactive fines. I sent it certified mail to Sandra and the board president. Then I posted a neutral message in the neighborhood group chat asking if anyone else had experienced portal issues or missed deadlines. Within an hour, 3 neighbors messaged me privately. They all had similar stories. One neighbor, a retired teacher named Diane, said Sandra had fined her twice for snow depth violations even though she paid a plow service. Another neighbor, a nurse named Carl, said Sandra measured his snowbank at 3 in the morning and claimed it exceeded the limit. A third neighbor, a freelance designer named Kim, said Sandra sent a vendor to her door to verify compliance, and the vendor tried to provoke a reaction by blocking her driveway. All of them were afraid to speak up because Sandra controlled the meeting agendas and kept people on the schedule for months. I asked if they had proof. Diane sent me a photo of her plow service receipt. Carl sent me a timestamp from his doorbell camera showing Sandra in his yard at 3:12 in the morning with a tape measure. Kim sent me a screenshot of the vendor message thread where Sandra explicitly told him to make it difficult. I saved everything. The next morning, I woke up to another notice taped to my door. This one claimed my driveway was not cleared to the property line and my snowbank was encroaching on the sidewalk. It included a photo taken from the street. The photo showed a 2-inch strip of snow along the edge of my driveway and a small pile of snow on the grass beside the sidewalk. Neither was a violation. I took my own photos from the same angle, showing the snow had melted by mid-morning. Sandra had taken her photo at dawn, right after the plow went through. I called the plow contractor and asked for their service window. They told me they hit my street between 5 and 6 in the morning, which meant Sandra was following the plow and taking photos immediately after, before anyone had a chance to clear the new snow. I asked the contractor if that was normal. He laughed. "You are the third person this week who asked me that. Your HOA lady is out here every morning with a camera. She is costing me time because people keep calling to complain." I asked if he would be willing to write a statement. He said yes. I sent him a template and he sent it back signed, confirming the service window and Sandra's pattern. I added it to my evidence folder. That afternoon, I got another group text. This one claimed I missed the deadline to dispute the fines and they were now overdue. I replied with a screenshot of my certified mail receipt showing I sent the dispute 2 days earlier. Sandra replied immediately, "Your dispute was incomplete. You failed to include the required affidavit and fee." I read the bylaws. There was no affidavit requirement and no dispute fee. I replied with the bylaw section. Sandra did not respond, but 10 minutes later I got a private message from the board president, a retired accountant named Ed. He apologized and said Sandra was handling enforcement on her own and he was not aware of the new fines. He promised to review my dispute at the next board meeting. I asked when that was. He said it was not scheduled yet. Lucas called me that night. "You need to force the meeting," he said. "Send a formal request under state law. They have to hold a hearing within 30 days if you request one in writing." I drafted the request and sent it certified mail the next morning. 2 days later, I got a response. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out at 7 in the evening at the clubhouse. Sandra would be the meeting chair. The night before the hearing, Sandra sent a vendor to my door to verify snow compliance and provoke a reaction. The vendor was a guy in his 20s wearing a Canyon View Ice Run Terrace Association vest and holding a tablet. He knocked hard, then immediately started taking photos of my door and steps. I opened the door. "Can I help you?" He looked annoyed. "I am here to verify compliance. You need to clear your steps." I looked down. The steps were clear. There was a light dusting of snow from 10 minutes earlier, less than an inch. I pointed at the snow. "That just fell." "It is still snowing." He shrugged. "Rules say you have to clear within 12 hours. I am documenting non-compliance. I pulled out my phone and started recording. He stepped back. "You cannot record me." "I can," I said. "You are on my property." He looked at his tablet, then at me. "You are going to regret this." He took 3 more photos and left. I saved the video. The next morning, I got a message from Sandra claiming the vendor reported hostile behavior and refusal to comply. She threatened to send collections even though the fees were disputed and under appeal. I forwarded the video to Lucas. He called me immediately. "That is harassment," he said. "She is trying to provoke you into doing something stupid. Do not engage. Just document everything and bring it to the hearing. Stay calm." I spent the next 2 weeks building my case. I printed every email, every screenshot, every receipt. I organized them into a binder with tabs, portal outage, exemption letter, plow contractor statement, neighbor complaints, vendor harassment, Sandra's 3 a.m. measurements, and the fake deadline notices. I also had the video of the dawn tow attempt and the vendor confrontation. I made 3 copies of the entire binder. The day before the hearing, Sandra posted another violation notice. This one claimed my photos were old because the snow depth changed overnight. She included her own photos, taken at dawn again, showing deeper snow. I checked the weather data. There had been no new snow overnight. The depth difference was from wind drifting the existing snow into uneven piles. I printed the weather report and added it to the binder. On the night of the hearing, I arrived at the clubhouse at 6:45. The parking lot was nearly empty. Sandra was inside setting up a folding table at the front of the room. She had a laptop, a microphone, and a stack of papers. Ed, the board president, sat off to the side with 2 other board members I did not recognize. There were about a dozen residents in the audience, including Diane, Carl, and Kim. Sandra looked up when I walked in. She did not smile. "You are early," she said. I sat in the front row and set my binder on the chair beside me. Lucas had told me to sit close so I could hear everything and respond quickly. Sandra tapped the microphone. "We are going to start in 10 minutes. If you have materials to submit, bring them to me now." I walked up and handed her one of the binders. She flipped through it without reading. "This is a lot of paper," she said. "We will review what is relevant." I went back to my seat. At 7 sharp, Sandra called the meeting to order. She read a prepared statement about the purpose of the hearing and the authority of the board to enforce covenants. Then, she turned to me. "We are here tonight because you have refused to comply with multiple violations and have disputed fines totaling $750. You have also harassed board members and vendors. Do you have anything to say before we proceed?" I stood up. "Yes. I am disputing all fines because they are based on false deadlines, a non-functional portal, and a handrail that does not require a permit. I have documentation proving every claim." Sandra cut me off. "We are not here to debate the portal. We are here to address your non-compliance. Sit down." I stayed standing. "The bylaws say I have the right to present evidence." She glared at me. "You will have your turn. Sit." I sat. Sandra went through each violation, reading from her notes. She claimed I failed to clear snow within 12 hours, installed an unpermitted structure, obstructed a lawful tow, and harassed vendors. She showed photos of my driveway at dawn, my handrail, and a screenshot of the vendor message where I allegedly threatened him. She did not show my video of the vendor confrontation. She did not mention the portal outage. She did not acknowledge my dispute letter. When she finished, she looked at Ed. "Do you have any questions?" He shook his head. She turned to me. "Now you can speak." I stood and opened my binder. I started with the portal outage. I showed screenshots of the error message, emails to support, and testimony from other neighbors who experienced the same issue. Sandra interrupted. "The portal was operational. You failed to check it." I held up my phone. "I have 23 screenshots showing the portal down over 9 days. She waved her hand. "Those could be doctored." I am not accepting them. Lucas had warned me this would happen. I moved to the next tab. I showed the exemption letter from the city. Sandra interrupted again. That letter is not valid. The association rules override city code. I took a breath. State law says temporary safety devices are exempt from permits. This is not a permanent structure. It is a brace. Sandra leaned into the microphone. You installed it without approval. That is a violation regardless of permits. I moved to the tow attempt. I played the video on my phone, holding it up so the room could hear. Sandra screaming at the driver, threatening him, telling him to hook up my car. The driver refusing. Sandra storming off. When the video ended, Sandra was staring at me. That video is out of context, she said. You were obstructing a lawful enforcement action. I shook my head. The driver refused the tow because I showed him proof it was illegal. He said so on camera. Sandra slammed her hand on the table. You do not get to dictate what is legal. The board does. I felt my patience snap. The board does not override state law, Sandra. You know that. She stood up, face red. You are out of order. Sit down or I will have you removed. Ed looked uncomfortable. Sandra. Let him finish. She turned on him. He is wasting our time. We have already reviewed the violations. The fines stand. If you are enjoying this HOA nightmare, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where the receipts win. I did not stop her, because I wanted her on record. I let her keep talking. She went through the vendor complaint, claiming I threatened him and refused to comply. She did not play my video. I waited until she finished, then I stood again. I have video of the vendor interaction, I said. It shows him taking photos of snow that fell 10 minutes earlier and threatening me when I questioned him. Do you want to see it? Sandra hesitated. That is not necessary. I think it is, I said, and played the video. The room watched in silence. The vendor banging on my door, taking photos, claiming I was non-compliant over an inch of fresh snow, telling me I would regret recording him. When it ended, Carl spoke up from the audience. That is the same guy who blocked my driveway. Sandra ignored him. The vendor was doing his job, she said. You made it hostile. I held up the binder. I have statements from 3 neighbors describing similar vendor harassment. Do you want to hear them? Sandra looked at Ed. This is turning into a witch hunt, she said. We need to move on. Ed cleared his throat. Sandra, I think we need to hear the statements. She glared at him. Fine. I read Diane's statement about being fined twice despite having a plow service. I read Carl's statement about Sandra measuring his snowbank at 3 in the morning. I read Kim's statement about the vendor trying to provoke her. Each statement included timestamps, photos, and receipts. When I finished, the room was silent. Ed looked at Sandra. Did you measure snow at 3 in the morning? She crossed her arms. I was doing my job. Enforcement does not have business hours. Carl stood up. You were trespassing, Sandra. I have you on camera. She pointed at him. You are out of order. Sit down. Ed raised his hand. Sandra, we need to talk about this. Not here, she snapped. I pulled out the last tab in my binder. This one was labeled Trump Card. Inside was a transcript of a voice message Sandra had left on another neighbor's phone 6 months earlier. The neighbor, a woman named Rachel who had since moved out, had forwarded it to me after I reached out through the group chat. In the message, Sandra admitted the enforcement campaign was personal and she wanted to make an example of people who questioned her authority. She specifically mentioned my name. I did not mention the recording yet. I wanted Sandra to keep digging. She turned back to me. Are you done? I nodded. Then the fines stand, she said. You failed to comply, you obstructed enforcement, and you harassed vendors. The total is now $1,000, including late fees. You have 5 days to pay or we will file a lien. I looked at Ed. Are you going to let her do this? He looked away. I pulled out my phone and opened the audio file. "Before you vote," I said, "I have one more piece of evidence." Sandra froze. "What is that?" I played the recording. Her voice filled the room. "I am sick of people questioning every little rule. I want to make an example of someone, and that permit guy is perfect. He thinks he knows better than the board. I am going to fine him until he either pays or sells. If we let one person slide, everyone will think they can ignore us. This is about control. We need to show them who is in charge." The room erupted. Diane stood up. "You said this was about safety." Carl pointed at Sandra. "You admitted it is personal." Kim shouted from the back. "You are abusing your power." Sandra grabbed the microphone. "That recording is illegal. You cannot use it." I shook my head. South Dakota is a one-party consent state. Rachel consented when she recorded you. It is admissible. Ed stood up. "Sandra, we need to recess and discuss this." She shook her head. "No. We are finishing this vote." Ed looked at the other board members. They both looked uncomfortable. Sandra raised her voice. "I am the meeting chair. We are voting now. All in favor of upholding the fines, raise your hand." She raised hers. No one else did. She looked around. "Raise your hands." Ed shook his head. "I am not voting for this, Sandra. It is retaliation." She slammed the table again. "You are out of order." I submitted the recording as a formal exhibit and requested a copy of the meeting minutes. Sandra refused. I turned to Ed. "State law requires meeting minutes within 10 days. If you do not produce them, I will file a complaint with the Attorney General." He nodded. "We will produce them." Sandra glared at him. "You are undermining my authority." He stood up. "This meeting is over. We will reconvene next week after the board reviews the evidence." Sandra grabbed her laptop and stormed out. The residents stayed behind, talking in clusters. Diane came up to me. "Thank you for standing up to her." Carl shook my hand. "You have more guts than the rest of us." Kim asked if I was going to sue. I told her I was considering it, but I wanted to see what the board did first. Lucas called me as I walked to my car. "How did it go?" I told him about the recording. He laughed. "You buried her. She is done." The next morning, Sandra sent a final group text. It claimed the hearing was disrupted by a hostile resident and the board would reconvene without public comment. She also claimed I owed additional fines for disrupting the meeting and filing a frivolous dispute. Lucas told me to ignore it. "She is flailing," he said. "She knows she lost. Just wait for the board to act." 3 days later, Ed sent a private message. "The board met and voted to void all fines against you. We also voted to remove Sandra as meeting chair and adopt a policy clarification that limits enforcement discretion. She is still on the board, but she no longer has microphone control." He attached a copy of the new policy. It required written notice with proof of delivery, a minimum 72-hour compliance window, and third-party verification for all towing or lien actions. It also created an enforcement checklist that required board approval before issuing fines. I forwarded the message to Lucas. He called me immediately. "That is huge," he said. "They basically stripped her of power. The checklist means she cannot unilaterally fine anyone. The notice requirement means no more ambush violations. And the towing rule means she cannot weaponize vendors. You won." I felt relieved, but I was not done. I asked Ed if the board would issue a formal apology and refund any costs I incurred. He said he would bring it to the next meeting. 2 weeks later, the board sent a letter. It included a formal apology, a refund check for $200 to cover my certified mail and printing costs, and a statement that all prior violations were voided. The letter also announced the new enforcement policy and invited residents to submit feedback. Sandra did not sign it. Ed told me privately that she threatened to resign, but the other board members told her she could stay if she followed the new rules. I kept the snow gauge stake as a souvenir. Every time I looked at it, I remembered Sandra planting it in my snowbank and threatening daily fines. Now it sat on my desk as a reminder that documentation wins. I also kept the binder, because Lucas told me HOA disputes often flare up again and I would need the history. The neighborhood group chat changed after the hearing. People started speaking up about other enforcement issues. One resident complained about arbitrary landscaping fines. Another complained about pool rules that were never written down. A third complained about selective parking enforcement. Ed responded to each one and promised the board would review the policies. Sandra stopped posting. A month later, the board held an open forum to discuss the new enforcement policy. Sandra attended but did not speak. Ed presented the checklist and explained how it worked. Residents asked questions. One asked if the policy applied retroactively. Ed said yes, and any outstanding fines issued without proper notice would be voided. Another asked if the board would hire a management company. Ed said they were considering it, but had not made a decision. I ran into Sandra at the grocery store a few weeks later. She was in the produce section wearing her purple parka and black gloves even though we were indoors. She saw me and turned away. I kept shopping. At the checkout, she ended up in the line next to mine. She did not look at me. I did not say anything. When she left, the cashier asked if I knew her. I said we were neighbors. The cashier laughed. She tried to return something last week without a receipt and lost her mind when we said no. That tracks, I said. The winter ended without any more violations. The handrail stayed up through March, and I removed it in April when the ice melted. I submitted a notice to the board, just to be safe. Ed acknowledged it and thanked me for following protocol. Sandra did not respond. The next HOA election was scheduled for June, and Lucas told me Sandra was not running for re-election. Good, I said. Let someone else deal with her. In May, I got a call from a neighbor I did not know well, a retired engineer named Tom. He said he was running for the board and wanted to ask about my experience with Sandra. I told him the whole story. He took notes. When I finished, he said he wanted to use the enforcement checklist as a campaign platform. He believed the board needed more transparency and less personal grudge holding. I told him I would vote for him. Tom won the election by a landslide. Sandra did not attend the results meeting. The new board voted to hire a third-party management company and transfer all enforcement duties to them. The company conducted an audit and found dozens of improperly issued fines, missing notices, and undocumented vendor contracts. They voided 16 fines and refunded over $4,000 to residents. Sandra resigned from the board 2 weeks later. I saw her one more time, in July, loading boxes into a moving truck. She was leaving Canyon View Ice Run Terrace. I was walking past with my mail, and she glanced at me. I did not gloat. I just nodded and kept walking. Lucas called me that night. I heard she is moving, he said. Good riddance. I agreed. He asked if I felt vindicated. I told him I just felt tired. Vindication is exhausting, I said. He laughed. At least you got your refund. And your handrail stayed up. That is a win. The snow gauge stake is still on my desk. I look at it sometimes and think about the morning Sandra planted it in my snowbank and threatened daily measurements. I think about the tow truck idling in the street and the driver walking away. I think about the hearing and the recording and the look on her face when I played it. Mostly, I think about the checklist and the policy clarification that destroyed her favorite tactic. That is the real win. Not the refund. Not the apology. The fact that the board adopted an enforcement checklist that limits Karen tactics and removed Sandra as meeting chair so she lost the microphone control. I hope your driveway stays tow-free.